next, 2-3 years at least, maybe longer. And it's funny, now I just caught myself saying that, because my very first note conference I went to in 2009, people were saying, well, how long is this going to last? And the classic answer was like, 2 to 5 years. Well, 12 years later, we were still doing the same thing. So I don't know.
Let me give my little pitch for everybody that's watching about why, regardless of what we're talking about in the markets and non-payments, non-performing, why, at least personally, I think real estate now, tomorrow, and probably forever is the place to be, for a reason that not many people think about. And that is our capitalist system, that the government actually has served as a backstop of every financial calamity for the last 20 years. And there is so much money and so much value, not with you and I alone, but with Wall Street, with the billionaires, with the guys that really have it. So if there's seriously a problem in the United States, I 100% believe that the government will step in to backstop, lower interest rates, make life easier. So that's at least my pitch why I'm still a massive fan of real estate, even though interest rates are going up, things are a little bit shakier.
No, and there's opportunity on either side, whether the economy is doing well or not. There's opportunity, and again, we'll kind of preface that by saying, when we're talking about buying a non-performing note, and this is pretty much across the board, anybody who's buying performing notes, your first and best exit on that is to get the person living there to make payments again. And that can be through a modification. That can be through, we can be far more creative than a bank can be, because we bought it at a discount. So we've got tons of latitude to say, look, $800 wasn't working. Could you do 6? And then we can figure out something to do with your arrears. Like we've got far, far, far more bandwidth to just figure out all kinds of workarounds. So I really feel like the non-performing world, especially, we are absolutely part of the solution. We're not capitalizing on a problem. We're part of the solution. We're trying to make things happen, make it better.
Well, let's forget about what's not working, not forget about entirely, but for right now, let's talk about performing loans. Interest rates are like sky high for the last, highest over the last 20 years. Forget about the cut last month. What's it look like actually buying and investing and even managing and servicing a performing loan in today's market?
So that performing loan, again, is where people are making payments. So there's a bit of a trade-off there, because on the one hand, a performing note is far more predictable, far more, dependable on you can relatively well, you can expect when that person's going to make payment, and you can predict into, over the next few years, next several years, what your income is going to be on that performing note. Versus that non-performer that you picked up, it can go all kinds of directions. And I had it where, somebody, I thought for sure somebody was living there, and they'd only defaulted for, 6 months. Very much more likely to make payments than that kind of scenario. And then all of a sudden we find out, oh, never mind, it's vacant. And then we have to switch gears and do a foreclosure. And that can take however long it takes in that state. Which is
interesting. There's a wide variety. Like, I know you can foreclose quick in Texas. I know guys that went 10 years without paying in Nevada and still didn't get foreclosed.
I did as an experiment, I bought 2 notes in New York State. One was both like North New York. So one was right by Niagara Falls, actually. It's one of the only properties I've ever visited, but we happened to be at Niagara Falls. I'm like, hey, that one property is just around the corner. So we went and checked it out. There's that one, and then another upstate New York one. But so we're not even talking in the city. And they had already started foreclosure, which was the only reason I considered it in the first place. I'm like, well, they've already started, so it won't take that long. It took like 2.5 years each to finish the foreclosures on those. They'd already started, and that's where I picked up. So that's a very different story than Texas, where on paper, you can do it in 2 months. Quickest I've ever done is 4.
And I know that Texas has been a major hub for debt buying and investing.
Definitely.
Why is that? And what other states really are attractive to be acquiring debt in?
Texas is attractive for several reasons. The first one I think that most people think of is it's got that short foreclosure time. And so again, like that's kind of your just in case, that's your backup plan. If something goes wrong and if I have to foreclose, Texas is going to be much faster than New York or Nevada or many other states, most other states, in fact. So that's kind of one of the first things that's attractive. One of the other things that makes Texas a really a great state, and there's lots of reasons Texas is great, but another one for notes is
I'm here, but literally not pitching it because I'm here. It is truly a good state and market to be buying debt.
It's a great one. It's a great one. I'm up in Canada, and I'm a big Texas fan for notes. Texas is one of it's the highest seller finance state. So of all the seller finance deals that are done across the country, a quarter of them are done in Texas.
Wow.
A full quarter. So it by far the highest percentage is done in Texas. And the seller finance ones are fantastic performing notes. They tend to be higher interest rates. So even if your posted interest rate at the bank is 6, 7, 8%, a seller finance deal will probably pick up at that 8 at the lowest, and it'll be somewhere between. In Texas, I've seen as high as 11.5, okay. And in that range. So for me, as a performing note buyer, I'm looking for my target yield. The higher the posted interest rate, the less I'm going to have to discount to get where I want to be on my return. So if it's sitting, all these loans that were locked in 2020, 2021 at 2 and 3%, those are going to be very difficult for banks to offload as time goes on. And I think they know it. And I think they're trying to figure out ways to work around that. And maybe that's a different conversation,
this is a really important thing to consider because, people think interest rates are at 7, 8% today. Why would I ever buy a 3%? And there's actually a good answer to that.
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, it's all about the yield return. So that 3% for me is really difficult because the discount on that for me to get where I want to be is huge. So to buy that, that's a toughie. I'm curious what you've got. Why would you buy that 3%?
I mean, how big of a discount are we talking? Because you have to basically double, triple your return.
Yeah.
For it even to make sense. Now, the cash flow and the payments are little. However, the principal on actual final payoff, if not the amortization, is really huge compared to what that discount is. So if you're seeing those deals in the market, kind of what's the expectation? Or you're like, I just don't even deal with that, so I don't even know.
I actually just got a tape yesterday. So tape a list of loans that are for sale, performing loans, and the posted interest rates were somewhere between, I think it was like 3 on the low end and maybe 6, 5.5, 6 on the high end. Again, for me to get where I'm trying to get, like you say, we're talking like 50 cents on the dollar or more,
wow.
Like 50, 60, 70 cents on the dollar for those little 3%ers. So those are really tough to get those deals going. And then you got to take a step back from the bank's perspective. They're only lending this stuff at 3%. And they know that if they can somehow re-lend that same cash today, I mean, that's more than double for their projected income on that. So they're looking for ways. So if they can sell that, and if it makes sense for them, they'll take that cash back so that they can then re-lend that back out at a higher interest rate. So there's lots that goes on behind the scenes.
And you know what? I want to dive in a little bit deeper into the banking system and why the banks play ball with this, and then talk about those tapes a little bit more.
Sure.
If a bank has $100 in deposits, they can lend out around $1,000, 10x their deposit in loans.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. So that 3% on a deposit is actually more like 30% once they're able to leverage that up. So they are getting hurt if they have to sell it. However, because they're able to loan so much beyond what they actually have, it's still well worth it. And I can't even imagine what they're making nowadays at this 6, 8, 9% that I'm seeing, even with construction loans.
Yeah. And those construction loans, you're right. Those are even higher. So those are very interesting for the banks to get their teeth into, because we're all out here to make money. And so of course they're going to try to lend it back. So another comment, and I don't want to ruffle too many feathers. However, there's a big push these days. It's kind of the popular thing, I guess, where you're buying property subject to. It can be done, but there are some very, tricky points there. For example, if I'm buying a property subject to, so that means I am agreeing with the homeowner to say, essentially, I'm going to assume your mortgage. So I will take over the mortgage. You can get out of the deal for whatever sum we agree on. I'm then going to resell that property to somebody else, and they'll start making payments to me. Those payments will then go towards that first, and everything should be cool.
and this is the sub 2 that is really being heavily promoted by some influencers that are out there. And don't need to dive into who they are. They are doing a great job promoting themselves.
Yes, exactly.
From the debt buyer lender side, is it normal or easy to approve those types of deals? Are there like still guarantors besides the initial borrower? Like, how does that work from the debt buyer side? I don't really care about the other side.
Yeah. So that from the debt buyer side, here's my situation. So I would love to buy the loan that you've created with your new buyer. However, you've got that outstanding first behind it. So just give a scenario. Let's say that your new buyer, the person that's now living in the house, defaults on payment. And you, as an operator, as the debt collector, you don't have, for all kinds of different reasons, but let's just say you don't have the money to then pay the underlying first. The underlying first then starts foreclosure on the original borrower, because they are the ones that are still attached to that original mortgage. So it can get incredibly messy, incredibly fast. And so as a debt buyer, I am all about those wrap loans if we can pay off that underlying first when I buy the debt.
And then it's no longer a subject to, now it's just a regular debt.
It puts me back in first position, so there's nobody outstanding out there. And it's just so much cleaner, so much easier. So there's a big push with those subject to guys. Just make sure you're doing this correctly, and make sure that you're doing it. And I'm not going to get into how to do that correctly. That's not my game, but
somebody else's deal.
But make sure you're doing it in a way so that if you are looking to resell that wrap loan, that whatever I'm going to pay you is going to pay off that first, and you're not going to have to come out of pocket for that. Anyway, that's maybe a bit of a side note, but it's an important one.
We're here for tangents. That's the fun part of these discussions. And if anybody, all of you listeners, really appreciate you, want to be as responsive as we can to your questions. I know this is a very new area and new subject, so please throw them in chat. We would love to answer those as well. But carrying on, you mentioned a tape.
Yes.
Could you explain a little bit more about what that is? Because so many people just don't know.
Yeah, sure. So, and it's less common again today. It still happens, but less common. So back when I started, you would get these tapes, and that's a spreadsheet that has loans that whoever the mortgage holder is looking to sell. And I mean, going back in time, 2010, 11, 12, even those first few years, oh my goodness, I would have a different Google spreadsheet for every month. And every month I would get sent anywhere between 10 and 15 different tapes from different sellers. On those tapes would be anywhere from, and again, going back, anywhere from like 100 to 300 loans per tape. So I would be looking at thousands of different loans for sale every month, back when that was much more common and that was kind of the way it was done.